Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the inaugural Upper Valley MedTech Collaborative Pitch Competition. I'm Caitlin Mayer, CEO of Rehab and member of the UVMTC Steering Committee. The UVMTC was established to grow and support the MedTech community in the greater northern New England area, and I think there's no better way to showcase some of the incredible innovation coming out of the area than through a little friendly competition with a $10,000 cash prize at stake. And we wouldn't be here tonight without the support of the Black River Innovation Center, Mascoma Bank, Merritt and Merritt Lawyers for Growth. And we'd also like to thank our supporters, Next Phase Medical Devices, Dartmouth Health, Simbex, Nolato, Alex Peck Day Memorial Hospital, Goddard, New Hampshire Tech Alliance, Novacure, Sunrise Labs, and Sertronics. So thank you all, and beyond tonight's event, our sponsors also provide continuous support and resources for our local MedTech ecosystem. And I'd also like to thank the Lebanon Opera House for hosting and CATV for providing all of tonight's tech support in the live stream. I'd also like to thank our judges this evening, who all bring expertise in various facets of starting and growing a MedTech business. Our judges tonight are Trevor Barlow, the Executive Director of the Black River Innovation Center, Jenny Barbara, Managing Partner of Features Capital, Clay Adams, President of Mascoma Bank, Carlo Colasanti, CEO of Next Phase Medical Devices, and Ken Merritt, Principal of Merritt and Merritt Lawyers for Growth. Our 6 finalists were selected from a highly competitive applicant pool and has some great pitches in store. But first, I wanted to quickly run through our evening's program. Each finalist will give a 5-minute pitch, which I will alert you at 4 minutes and 30 seconds how much time you have left, followed by a 10-minute Q&A from the judges and the audience. The judges will ask their questions first, and then we'll move to audience questions. If you wish to ask a question, please line up behind the mic in the aisle, or if you are joining us from our live stream, please comment your question on our YouTube comments. And we'll get through as many as we have time for. And once all 6 companies have gone, the judges will deliberate, and you will have a chance to vote for the audience choice's winner. To vote, please scan the QR code that's on your program, and we will announce the winner of both the audience choice and the grand prize winner of $10,000. And following the competition, we'll have a networking reception with refreshments, so please stick around and meet our incredible finalists and fellow members of the UVMTC. And to kick it off tonight, first we'll begin with Ellecelle.
Good evening. Do you pee yourself? When you cough, sneeze, laugh, lift something heavy, go for a jog, does a little bit of pee come out, or a lot? Well, sadly, it's not a laughing matter for 1/3 of women who exercise, laugh, sneeze, or do any of those things. They suffer from the condition of stress urinary incontinence. The result is urine leakage upon exertion of any kind. And it's a humbling and it's an embarrassing condition. Fortunately, there are surgical treatments if physical therapy and other conservative things have failed, the most common of which is a polypropylene mesh sling. And 250,000 such procedures are done in the United States every year. And it's very effective, but not for all. 4 million or so procedures have been done globally, and many women have benefited, but 5% of that group have had serious complications. And that includes when the polypropylene mesh can poke through the skin of the vagina, causing pain, causing loss of intimacy, infection. It can even erode into the bladder, which can result in extensive surgery to fix it. There is a solution. You don't have to use polypropylene mesh. You can use your own tissue. That's not a new idea. In fact, autologous slings made of your own fascia have been around for about 100 years. but it requires taking fascia from either your own abdomen or the fascia from the side of your leg, which involves extra incisions, more likely to have surgical complications, pain, and extended recovery time. But what if you could grow your own sling from your own tissue in the lab? Ellecelle can. We have already been taking fibroblasts from patients undergoing routine surgical procedures, growing the fibroblasts, which make those are the cells which make the collagen, and seeing the best environment for them to grow and for wounds to heal. We've been doing that. What we want to do next is to grow it on a scaffold, which will eventually dissolve, leaving the patient just with their own tissue as their sling. We're backed up over the last couple of years with some pretty robust research, publications in surgical journals and at national meetings. And NH Biomed has given us $50,000 starting this July to start doing that work, growing the fibroblast cells on a particular scaffold in anticipation of a surgical graft. The next step for us would be animal research to support an IDE and eventually human trials. The market is significant. For SAM, we have $1.6 billion in 2020, projected to go up to $2.3 billion by 2028. For an SOM, you're looking at 23 million, and we get that from taking the 1% of patients who currently have an autologous sling, but we add to that the 5% of those polypropylene mesh patients who will need a revision of their sling, and you're up to 138 million. We project that to increase to about 10% of the market if we had a product, because we have had patients ask us, is there an alternative? I don't want mesh. And we project that 10% of the market will want a product like this. We have significant competition. Those are the four big players, recognizable companies with recognizable logos. We at Dartmouth Hitchcock pay $1,200 for every single sling that we place. But there were many who left the market because the FDA said no more to their products, which means there's a gap in the market. Patients who don't want mesh, but who do want treated. Our business model would be a business-to-business. We anticipate that patients and surgeons will want this. Patient advocate groups will be a good, positive influence. But ultimately, it's the hospital system and the operating room supply who we will sell to after FDA approval. Our team consists of Dr. Chuck Weira and Mickey Patel, both expert at growing fibroblasts and have been doing so for many years. Our engineer is Rebecca Thompson, who is just about to start a surgical innovation PhD. And she's the one who's going to be responsible for developing the scaffold, which will maintain its tensile strength to give us the support we need. And I'm the surgical and clinical side. Women are suffering, and they don't want a piece of plastic in their bodies to fix it. Ellecelle has the plan for the solution, a natural graft when and where women need it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Jonny. So what is the animal study model you're using? What will it take to give you a sense of, okay, we're ready to go to human studies? What do you need to do?
So after discussion with one of the professors at Borwell Research Building, who is the chief of the veterinary service there, he suggested a pig porcine model, which would mimic the human tissue well. And we would implant the graft, even grown from porcine fibroblasts, back into them. One of the reasons for that is to avoid the antigens of the foreign fibroblasts. So if we can use an autologous fibroblast throughout the animal studies, then we can show proof of concept. So a porcine model.
Like how many pigs, or how long, how much is this going to cost?
Well, pigs are more expensive than rats, and so that's one of the limitations. It costs somewhere between $20 to $50 a day for a pig, and we need to look at those pigs for about 6 months period of time. So the costs quickly ramp up. The pigs have access, by the way, to anesthesia and good food and good treatment in those labs.
So I was curious as to, I think you said that your clinicals were going to start human trials in 2025.
Yeah, well, we realize it's going to take a few years to get through the animal studies. And,
Right. So
yeah.
how much funding do you think you need between now and then?
We probably need upwards of $200,000 to do the animal studies well, and that's before we would have
But
access.
between now and 28, what type of funding would you require?
We need to nail down the amounts, but yeah, I can get back to you on that.
Can you speak to the competition a little bit more? J&J and
Sure.
Caldera, Boston Scientific, they're all doing or have exited the mesh business.
The four that I showed are still in the mesh business.
And are they also, or are there others considering this methodology or anything like it?
Those companies, as far as I know, aren't. There are other smaller companies. The one I looked at is based in Sheffield in the UK, and they've done some similar studies. They've done some rat studies, but no porcine studies as far as I know. But they've shown that this can be done, that you can create an autologous graft. There's another one in the Netherlands and Australia, but in the States I'm not aware of anyone doing this. There are, by the way, sorry, you were going to ask about, there are, by the way, other companies which make cadaveric fascia, porcine grafts as well, xenografts. I don't consider those the competition because I want this to be autologous.
Is there any intellectual property protection available for this, patent or otherwise?
We've got a provisional patent already submitted. The IP will continue to be generated, and that will be related to the scaffold, primarily the size of the fibers and the pores, as well as the actual scaffold that the fibroblasts grow best on, and that's the research we have funding for from NH Biomed this year. So that will involve some leaching studies, testing fibroblasts in vitro, determining how best they grow with different polymers.
In your presentation, you're talking about the current issues with the existing technology. How do you see your solution mitigating that, and what's kind of the durability of your solution? Do you expect it to be light years ahead of what exists now, even with the risks involved? Or kind of, I guess, what are your thoughts at this stage?
That's a good question. Part of the reason why the material, the polypropylene material, can cause problems is its rigidity, and autologous grafts just don't have that same consistency. With our product, we would hope to avoid some of the issues with both inflammatory reaction to the foreign material. Although polypropylene is said to be mostly inert in the body, there still is an inflammatory reaction. Autologous material is the patient's own tissue, so the immunological reaction we hypothesize would be less. And that's something else we want to look at in animal studies. Then the other thing is the current studies with the polypropylene show that it's about 3% reoperation rate at 2 years, but that increases with time. So if we did a 2-year study, we would hypothesize that the indications for revision, which was mesh exposure and being too tight and other things like that, could be mitigated by having material which would be not as rigid, not rejected by the body, and would be accepted essentially by the patient because it's their own tissue. So it's those issues we're looking to mitigate. We have data already from autologous fascia that we take from the leg or from the abdomen that those patients are much less likely to have an exposure of the sling or pain with sex and other issues like that.
But similar durability, you believe?
Similar durability, yes, good question. So that's one reason why I spoke about xenografts. Xenografts compared to autologous grafts they're more likely to be broken down because still they're foreign material. whereas autologous grafts have been shown to be as durable in other randomized controlled trials, as durable as polypropylene mesh.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any audience questions?
I really enjoyed your presentation. I direct that surgical innovation program. I was delighted to see Becca's involved, and I think 2 other of our trainees are involved tonight, and I'm here taking pictures to document their participation. But I was just curious if you thought, or you have any understanding what your FDA pathway will be for this? There are certain predicates, it seemingly, and what are your thoughts there?
So after speaking with a consultant last week, this would be a class 3 device, medical device, which would need to go through the 510K process. It might also be considered a de novo part of the 510K process.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Rick Greenwald from Simbex. Curious, as your team thinks about this project long term, what do you think is the biggest risk you're going to face? Is it the technology working, the concept working? Is it the business risk? You were asked about the amount of money needed to get there. It's kind of an important piece of it. You know, what do you guys think the biggest challenge will be as you go forward?
I think so. There's one challenge with all randomized controlled studies. Ultimately, we would want to show that our product is non-inferior to another product. Getting the good long-term data for that's always a challenge with any study, and this in particular, because we would probably want something at least 2 years, and to prove that our product continues to not have the risk of mesh exposure and so on beyond that, I think will be a challenge. We already have data showing polypropylene is effective long-term. I think that's going to be a challenge for us. It just will take time to get the data.
And a lot of money.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. I think that's all the time we have for questions.
Thank you.
today.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Imago Rehab.
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Chrissy Glover. I'm co-founder and CEO of Imago Rehab, where we are developing a robot-assisted virtual clinic for stroke recovery. So to start, I would like you all to meet Carol. Carol suffered a stroke about 5 years ago that totally rocked his life. So he had to stop working. He was left with physical impairment to the full right half of his body, including a paralyzed hand that is stuck in this fisted position and just won't open. Now, you can imagine if you only have one functioning hand, how this would drastically decrease your quality of life, making tasks such as cooking, driving, even picking up grandchildren difficult or impossible to complete. And unfortunately, this situation is the norm. So about 3/4 of all stroke survivors, or around 5 million individuals in the US alone, have lasting hand impairment. Now, it actually is possible for patients to recover hand function if they do high-intensity rehab, so essentially moving their hand hundreds of times per day. However, this is not achieved in the standard of care today, leading all these patients to think that they'll be stuck this way for the rest of their life. So at Imago, our goal is to give stroke survivors their hands back. We do that by meeting patients where they are in their home through telehealth sessions delivered by our top stroke occupational therapists that are supplemented by a soft robotic glove we've developed that physically moves the hand while also measuring progress and enables the necessary high-intensity rehab. So in a single session using our glove, a patient will move their hand 300 times. So that's 10 times greater than the reps they would receive in clinic, and they have this in their home so they can do this daily. So really what we've developed is a digital health solution for physical rehab, and it works. So if you remember Carol from the start of this, he participated in our first home-based safety and efficacy trial, and after just 1 month, you can see how much looser his hand was. He regained strength to open his fingers, and most importantly, what this translated to is now he can use his hand functionally again for things like gardening, as you see here. So what we're learning is that when we combine this robotic-based therapy with the telehealth, it leads to functional change, but also behavioral change, as our therapists are with the patient along their care journey, guiding them on new strategies to use their re-strengthened hand again. Now, for how we will get this out there, we'll offer a monthly rehab subscription. So patients get the glove device at home, twice weekly telehealth calls, and all of the associated progress reports and data analytics. Our revenue model uses existing DME and CPT codes so that our reimbursable revenue will be about $1,000 per month. And when we look at this in the context of just our specific US target market, so just focusing in on those patients with this fistedness, this would yield a $3 billion market opportunity. In terms of where we are now, we are actively on the market generating revenue in our paid private beta. So we're working with stroke survivor clients, treating them over telehealth sessions, while some of them also get to use a prototype glove device for free. Oops. So we're seeing great traction. We have clinicians, neurologists at Mass General Hospital who have been referring patients to us. We're currently treating 15 stroke survivors, 4 of whom are using a glove device, and we have pent-up demand. So we have a growing wait list. We get about 1 new referral per week from neurologists. So if we could treat everyone on our wait list today, we would be billing at a rate of about $140,000 per year with no marketing spend. On the device side of things, we have an issued patent for our actuator technology, a pending patent for our sensing algorithms. And in terms of fundraising, we did our first pre-seed round of $350K about a year ago. We received a $150,000 award from the Advanced Functional Fabrics of America Institute that is going directly towards funding our design for manufacturing efforts for the glove. And we're currently in the midst of raising our $2.5 million seed round, which will allow us to get our first manufactured and qualified units. I'm excited to announce that we just became in network with Medicare and 2 other private payers in Massachusetts, so we can start billing insurance for these therapy sessions. And in terms of regulatory for this device, it'll be a Class 1 exempt device, so we plan to register and list with the FDA in just over a year. And in the first 6 months of operating this beta, we are really excited to have delivered a total of about 40 months of therapy across 15 clients, including 280 individual telehealth sessions, and we've enabled over 130,000 repetitions of the hand, which otherwise would be basically 0. And remarkably, we've seen no plateau, so our patients have been continuing to recover, getting back the ability to do things like cutting bread and grasping and releasing a ball for the first time since their stroke. Finally, our team has the necessary expertise across wearables, robotics, occupational therapy, and business to achieve our vision. So I'm passionate about helping people with disabilities through wearable technology. I was fortunate to do my master's at Harvard, where I worked in the lab with Professor Connor Walsh, along with my co-founder, Kristen Knuckles, who's an expert occupational therapist, and that's where we originally incubated this technology. And we're guided by key advisors who have expertise from rehab robotics to telehealth, digital health, and neurology. And we hope you will join us on our mission to restore independence to stroke survivors through accessible, evidence-based care, so we can enable more patients to say things like, "I've never seen my hand do that before, my hand is alive again." And so we can continue creating the dream for both patients and clinicians alike. Thank you so much.
So what's your biggest limitation right now to growth?
Yeah, great question. So our biggest limitation right now is number of devices available. So we have 4 devices currently that we can send out with patients, and that has been our max for longer than we were hoping for it to have been. So we're actively in the process of building 20 more prototype devices. But with these prototype devices, they're obviously not perfect, so we'll have bugs that will come up that we need to actively fix. So we can't be in this prototype stage forever. So once we build those 20, we'll then shift to really focusing on design for manufacturing so that we can get units from manufacturers that are much more robust and reliable. So really getting the devices is our biggest holdup at the moment.
I was curious in listening to the story. How much of the therapy, the therapeutic value comes from the therapist versus, the glove itself?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it is a bit of a mix. So there's value that comes from the therapy and the glove. I would say the glove is really our secret sauce. So it's, what enables the hand to move. And really for stroke recovery, that's kind of the basis of it. You just need to be doing these repetitions. And if you don't have a robotic device to move your hand, you really can't. So where the therapy comes in is it's really focused on goal setting and behavior change. So the patients typically will use the glove 5 days a week. That's our recommendation. And then twice a week, they'll talk with their dedicated therapist. And in these sessions, the therapists are really focused on coaching the patient through new ways to use their hand again. So these are patients they're chronic, so maybe it's been 3 to 5 years where they haven't ever used their hand, so they need to learn new strategies. So that's where the therapists really are key. So we did learn early on that we didn't want to really just give a device to a patient and say, good luck, you're on your own. Having that human there is pretty important to their recovery.
Excellent presentation. Could you expand a little bit on your marketing and sales program? Are you marketing to licensed providers? Are you marketing to hospitals? What's the plan there?
Yeah, so in terms of sales and marketing, we'll really have 2 primary channels. So the first channel is what we're validating right now, which is clinician referrals. So we'll be targeting neurologists, physiatrists, and PCPs who work with stroke patients, and basically have them be the gateway to refer patients to us. So the neurologists that we're working with now, we had an initial meeting with them, explained our solution and the results that we can provide. And what they're used to is having stroke patients come to them year after year saying, my hand is still like this, what can you do to help me? And they're thinking, realistically nothing, but I'll refer you to occupational therapy anyway, just so you feel like there's some hope. So they've all been pretty excited to, instead refer the patients to us in our virtual clinic. Building those relationships with other provider practices will be a primary channel of growth, but then we'll also aim to do a direct-to-patient approach, so really focusing on social media and digital advertising to also reach the patients directly.
Not to get too far ahead, but are there other applications beyond stroke survivors with this hand application where a wearable therapeutic technology could be built off your platform?
Yeah, so we've actually studied this robotic glove technology in the spinal cord injury population. So there's a lot of applicability to other neuro conditions like spinal cord, some traumatic brain injury, cerebral palsy. So that's one area for sure. And then also some orthopedic recovery. So depending on the condition or the procedure that was done, somebody might just need to repetitively move their hand. We've also talked with hand therapists who've suggested even burn recovery or arthritis. So it could be applicable to other conditions. Our thinking at the moment in terms of our vision and how we expand is for stroke survivors, so somebody like Carol, the hand isn't his only problem. He also has, shoulder, elbow, lower limb impairment. So most likely what we'll do is expand into those other limbs, so adding a foot device so we can get into the physical therapy space and then really become a one-stop virtual clinic for comprehensive post-stroke recovery.
Chrissy, thinking long-term here, are you intending to build the company and expand sales force and do this all yourself, or who would potential acquirers be and at what stage?
Yeah, great question. So in terms of growing the company, what we'll need to do as a virtual clinic is we do need to expand into all of these states, make sure our therapists are licensed in the states, and go through the insurance credentialing in each state. So that's to say, it's no work to do all of that. So in terms of our exit strategy and also growth plan, what we are thinking is that a likely exit or acquisition could be with a digital health company that's operating in the musculoskeletal or physical therapy space. So there's a lot of examples now, companies like Hinge Health, Sword, Omada, and others who they all have a very similar solution where it's a sensing-based solution that monitors the patient's movement and then guides them on physical therapy exercises devices, but nothing that really like moves the limbs. So we're seeing these companies make a lot of acquisitions of device-based companies. So we do think it's likely that Imago could be an attractive acquisition opportunity for them because they can differentiate across their competitors, physically move the limb, and then from our perspective, that would be very helpful because they already have the provider network set up across the country, the licensing, the credentialing, et cetera.
Hey, Chrissy, I had one more question. I'm just curious, what motivated you to found a company? How did you get the idea, and what were the drivers?
Yeah, so for me personally, ever since I was younger, I guess since high school, I wanted to help people and make clothes and start a company to do so in some fashion. So the way that path ended up going, I studied textile and apparel design starting out, and then in college, I kind of learned about two different things in parallel. So one was I learned about wearable technology, started tinkering in electronics and programming and like making textile-based sensors. And then I also learned that assistive technology was a thing and that there's a large percentage of this population, people with physical impairment, where clothing actually poses a challenge to them. So why can't we actually use clothing or wearable technology to help them? So my personal thesis for a while now has been developing assistive wearable technology for individuals with disabilities. And then when I joined this lab at Harvard, I joined this project that was creating this wearable robotic glove. My co-founder Kristen joined at a similar time, and we realized like there could be a lot of potential for this technology to spin out and really help all of these patients. So we ran an initial pilot study, saw really great results, took it to a conference, got really good feedback from clinicians that it solved an unmet need, and then we were motivated to spin it out so it actually could help these patients.
Very good. Thank you.
I think we'll have time for one audience question if there's one. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And for anyone who joined the live stream, if you would like to ask a question during the audience section, please just type it in the comments and we can read it out loud here. Next up, we have Pure Technologies.
Who here has back pain, lower back pain? Show of hands, anyone? I hope it hasn't led to surgery, but the chances are it might one day. Spine surgery is one of the most common surgeries out there, especially in an aging population. But the great issue with spine surgery is that it doesn't always lead to pain relief. And sometimes the surgery itself can introduce new pain to the patient. I'm here representing Pure. We're a phase 1 funded spin-out company out of Dartmouth. And we're trying to make spine surgery simpler, safer, and more efficacious. So there's about a 60% prevalence of lower back pain in the US, and that leads to about 300,000 cases of lumbar interbody fusion every year in the US. And that fuels a $1 billion market. The standard of care is to take two vertebral bodies and fuse them together into one bone through the insertion of what's known as an interbody cage. Now, there's a number of issues with this standard of care. The tools to insert that cage are manual and they're crude. The cages themselves are extremely expensive, adding to the procedural costs. And while fusions are clinically beneficial, the insertion techniques can lead up to 15% of the nerve root damage, and that is one of the main intraoperative reasons why patients have a recurrence of their pain after a few years. So the crux of the issue is really an issue of size. An interbody cage is about the size of your thumb, but the access to the spine that's required is about the size of a Coke bottle's neck. And so if I were to insert my thumb into that Coke bottle, it probably won't fit. It might even get stuck. And so what I need to do is really open up that bottle and maybe even break it. And so in surgery, what that looks like is moving nerves out of the way, moving vessels out of the way. And that is one of the main sources, the compression of those is one of the main sources of injury. So at Peer, we have a diverse team, and we're leveraging our founders' 30 years of experience as a spine surgeon to develop a cageless approach to a spinal fusion. Instead of breaking that neck of the bottle, we have a ship-in-a-bottle approach to insert into a narrow cavity. And we use our patented tissue cutters to insert into the spine, and then we turn them on to create a larger fusion site or a fusion cavity. Now, our product consists of three things. It consists of the tissue cutters, or custom drill bits of various sizes. It consists of an anchoring device, and it also consists of smart sensors and enabling technologies. And these combine to make the cliff approach smarter, simpler, and safer. Now, our approach to the market is we want to target an indication of spondylolisthesis, because in this patient population, there's clear evidence that fusions work, but cages don't always work. And so we want to enter into the market with a posterior approach and then expand into the larger spondylolisthesis population and the larger fusion market. Now, we have a two-tiered approach to the regulatory strategy. We first want to submit 510K submission for our tissue cutters alone, the drill bits alone, for which we already have QMS in place. Then we'll later resubmit for a 510K submission for the full system with smart sensors and enabling technologies. The product that we're going to sell directly to hospitals consists of a reusable anchoring system and then disposable single-use tissue cutters. By using pre-existing CPT codes, physicians will still be able to get the lucrative amount of reimbursements from a caged approach to fusion, but by reducing recurrence, by removing cages, and also having increased efficiency will save the hospitals money. Now, we are actively pursuing a phase 2 application, and we're targeting a September 1st deadline. And so the funds we hope to get tonight will go directly to last push items to get the most competitive application for that phase 2. PEER stands for Patient Excellence and End Result, and we believe that with this technique and with this product, patients will get the end result of reduced pain in spine surgery. Thank you.
Can you share a little bit about how you plan to distribute this, and how do you enter into this, what is already a very competitive supply chain and very mature?
We believe this is going to be a physician-led innovation because it is a very disruptive technology, and so having those physician partners that will be champions of this.
Do you have any lined up at this point beyond our current neck of the woods?
No, we don't. Okay. Not at the moment.
Beyond the phase 1, phase 2,
yes.
What do you see as your financing needs in terms of timing and amount?
Yes, so we believe phase 2 will get us all the way through live animal experiments, but after that we'll want to do a human trial or in phase or in human study, and that will require some angel funding of about $3 million. And then later, once we actually get regulatory approval, we hope to garner some venture capital funding of about $10 million to do a marketing trial where we will go head-to-head with interbodies.
So the spine market is tough.
Yes.
But if things work, they work. So can you describe where this fits in the continuum? I mean, you've talked about cages, but where does this fit at what stage of pain or disease or damage? And will this be a first resort? How do you see this in the continuum of care?
We see this as a first resort. So anywhere a cage is used, we expect this to be a disruptive technology, so an alternative to a caged approach. So we see it as a first-line treatment for pain reduction.
So with that, do you have an anticipation of what you're going to need to see clinically for data?
Yes. For a near-term clinical data, with our live animal studies, we'll hope to see a fusion after about 3 or 4 months within the animal after performing this procedure.
Are there any other benefits beyond the pain reduction elements that you're trying to achieve that you
Yes.
see because of this being a lighter weight, less invasive?
Yes, this will be very much less invasive. There's going to be time benefits, so because this will be as easy as operating a hand drill, the time of surgery for a fusion might take anywhere from 2 to 3, 4 hours, and with this, we automate that process, so it will greatly reduce the time a surgeon and the patient are in surgery.
Should we open it up for audience questions if there are any, including the live stream?
So how easy do you think this is going to be to integrate with physicians? Is there any training required for the new tools that you guys have or the proprietary tools, or is it similar to the experience that they already know?
It would be similar to the experience they already know. We plan to leverage as much as we can of the current technology. So in some of our development, we hope that our drill bits will be integratable with already existing surgical drills, and so they'll be adaptable. So it'll be very similar to what they already use currently.
Okay, thank you.
There's a question from the YouTube. I think you may have touched on this in the beginning, but what is the expected market available for this graft is the question. So your expected market.
Yes. So with an entrance market of spondylolisthesis, that's about 150,000 cases a year in the US. So that would be our expected market.
What are the dollar amounts around that? Any idea? Variable.
Variable, yes. That makes up, well, to answer that question, the 300,000 cases a year is $1 billion market, and so spondylolisthesis represents about half of that market.
And you said you have a disposable and a reusable.
Yes, so the reusable part would be the anchoring system itself, so the drill guide. The disposable part would be the tissue cutters. Those would be single use. So similar to how a single interbody cage is only used once because it's placed in the patient, we would use our tissue cutters only once.
But charge the same amount.
Yes.
All right, if there's no more questions, thank you.
Thank you.
And up next, we have Rytek Medical.
Hello, my name is Alicia Everitt, and I would like to start by thanking the Upper Valley MedTech Collaborative for the opportunity to speak to you all today about OsteoSmartSense, which is a drill for preventing dental implant injuries. The prevalence of dental implants is skyrocketing. In fact, if you're an adult, you have a 50% chance that you are already missing at least one permanent tooth. If you're over 65, you have a 20% chance that you are missing all of your permanent teeth. This leads to 15 million dental implants being placed worldwide annually, and in the US alone, 3 million implants are placed a year. For a little perspective, this is 3 times as many knee and hip replacements combined. However, the dental field has been stagnant for decades, but this is not because a disruptive technology is not needed. In fact, complications occur in up to 40% of procedures. Specifically, when you're drilling the osteotomy, or the hole in the bone, there's a high-risk nerve canal that runs under our lower jaw. Additionally, we have sinus cavities in our upper jaw. Interfering with these structures can result in chronic pain, chronic sinus infections, and in some cases, even partial facial paralysis. OsteoSmartSense is the first dental drill capable of real-time sensing and detecting these high-risk boundaries. We are able to give live feedback to the clinician during drilling. We are easily adoptable as we interface to the current standard of care. We maintain a safe boundary of the 2 mm threshold around the nerve canal. And finally, we're low cost to maximize quick adoption. We have a highly advanced team that has helped make OsteoSmartSense what it is today, which includes our CEO and founder, Ryan Halter, who is an associate professor at Dartmouth Engineering. Our chief medical officer is a board-certified oral and maxillofacial surgeon. And myself, as chief technology officer, graduated from Dartmouth with a PhD in biomedical engineering and as a Thayer Innovation Fellow. We also have our esteemed board, Robert Segal and Dave Lopez, who bring a combined 60 years of business experience in biotech and investment financing to complement our high technical skills of our C-suite. In the current approaches paradigm, conventional CTs and X-rays are the main implant planning procedure. However, OsteoSmartSense would be the first real-time ability to detect proximity of the tip of that drill bit to high-risk anatomical features without ionizing requirements. In fact, we actually see OsteoSmartSense as not competing with the current technologies, but being an augmentation, as it can be used in combination with planning and tracking while you're doing the implant procedure. The total market for surgical implants is projected to be $8 billion by 2028. If we consider a serviceable market of being only the countries where we have applied for IP, we end up with a market of $6.2 billion. And if we consider a serviceable obtainable market to be an assumption of 25% adoption abroad and 50% domestically, we end up with a sum of $2.8 billion. Further, we have gathered multiple commitments and testimonials of future customers wanting OsteoSmartSense, established commitments for future multi-site clinical trials, completed a pre-submission FDA meeting where we are now informing our protocols based on their feedback, and secured IP around this technology. Our strategy is to target early dentists and those who are seeking advanced technologies, and then partner with dental support organizations, multi-site practices, and even academic educational programming programs to help distribute and disseminate OsteoSmartSense. We are operating under a dual revenue model where there will be the one-time purchase of the hardware, the software, and our user interface, and then the recurring purchase of the custom drill bits and the wiring harnesses. All of this positions OsteoSmartSense to experience rapid adoption as we will be reducing complication rates, and we interface directly to the current standard of care without compromising ergonomics. This helps reduce our barriers to entry. To date, we have raised $2 million in non-dilutive funding, and we recently just applied for another $3.4 million in non-dilutive awards. Our goal this year is to raise a $1 million bridge round, which will see us through FDA IDE application. At this point in time, we are in an exciting position where the UVMTC funds would be greatly helpful with IP acceleration and with navigating a business strategy decision where we are spinning OsteoSmartSense into its independent entity out of Rytek Medical. The bridge funds would be useful for verification and validation, establishing our good manufacturing processes, and seeing through that IDE application. With that, we are excited to bring OsteoSmartSense into the hands of clinicians, help reduce morbidity, and eventually create implants without injury. Thank you. I'll take any questions.
Excuse me, is there medical reimbursement for implant procedures, Medicare, Medicaid, whatever?
It's up and coming. So yes, but not across the board. The US is a little behind the curve on reimbursing implants. A lot of it goes straight to the patient, but it's becoming more and more common.
And what kind of price point is this, at least relative to the current technology that's out there? Is it just on a relative basis?
Yeah, so there is no technology that does this right now. That being said, we're considering a price point around $7,500, which would be significantly less than the cost of a dental drill. But then again, we are an ancillary device, but we are able to be used repetitively. So we see ourselves as low cost.
And is the market specialists like oral surgeons, or is it more general practitioners who are perhaps also doing implants?
That's a great question. One of the contributions to this incidence rate is the aging population combined with the increase in general dentists doing implant procedures. We would be targeting oral surgeons first. It is a specialist-specific procedure. That being said, if we take our Aspen Dental that we all might know really well, in 2010 they did 2,000 implants, and in 2015 they did 15,000. So there will be need in both avenues, but specialists would be our start.
So I wasn't clear on kind of the price points. You mentioned 7,500. How does that compare to the standard of care today?
So,
and then how do you get a patient to go for that?
Right, good question. So current dental drills are, I believe, somewhere around 40,000, 40,000? Double digits of the thousands, I'd have to check that. In terms of this device, it really helps a huge increase in safety, but also reduction of rehabilitation and complication management, also a reduction in liability to the surgeon. So that would be our avenue would be direct to surgeons, and then long term there might be also potential to collaborate with the required codes for safety around the long-term liability costs with insurance agents.
Yeah, that was going to be my question. Are these dentists, excuse me, or dental surgeons on the hook for liability, risk? You know, if there's damage to the nerve, do they get a ding on their med mal? Like, is there some health economic risk component here to the dentist if they were to use something like this versus standard of care?
Higher risk would hopefully be what we were reducing, but currently it would depend, I believe, on if it was under a reimbursement or not. So that depends on your insurance, but there might be weight to the insurance versus weight to the practitioner versus responsibility to the patient. So all three, it depends on which dentist you're at and which
so like
insurance
if
you have.
things go wrong, is this a permanent nerve damage, like pain for a day, a year? Like what's the pain point here?
Yeah, it depends on the severity of the injury. So sometimes you have injury to the nerve just by getting too closer than that safety threshold, and you have heating. That might result in numbness, tingling, might heal itself over time. If you intersect the nerve, you're having risk of higher, longer-term consequences. And then similarly on the upper jaw, not only do we have increased sinus infections, but actually if you puncture the sinus, you have an increased rate of failure on those implants, which recurrence, having to repeat an implant, is a cost that is often on the practitioner themselves.
So you said you have, the two revenue streams essentially on both sides of this equation. What do you see as the value of the mitigation of your technology against these risks and against these additional costs? Like, do you have a tangible number that you use kind of as an initial model?
That would depend a little bit on what our phase 1 efficacy shows. Right now, the number that we discuss is based a lot more on the interest that we've been shown, the customer interviews that we've done, and then knowing where the potential market growth is, and that we're really entering into a unique space where there's not much competition.
Looks like we have an online question. Richard Adams from Simbex is asking, what kind of feedback do clinicians get from this device? Would they need additional training to use the drill?
That's a great question. So right now, the drill comes with a in-field of view LED on its distal head. So at the handpiece, that will show either a green is good, yellow, you're approaching a boundary, red, stop. But then also there is a user interface tablet that would be able to enable more specific feedback. We just wanted to be able to make sure they didn't have to look away from the field of view to receive that.
In terms of the price point, maybe I missed it. Obviously, the drill you mentioned, at about a $7,500 price point. But what is the consumable per patient cost? Because I'm assuming, you got your hardware, then you got your consumables.
Yes. So our custom drill bit electrodes are factored at a use of 10 per bit, which is the same as the standard. And we would be selling those with the custom wiring harnesses for about $500 a use, which is similar to current price points.
Is that single use, or are they?
No, that's for the 10 uses.
10 uses?
Yes.
Okay, so $50 per.
$50, yes.
Okay. In terms of the clinical data, what are your endpoints? Like, I don't know dentistry enough, so what would be the endpoint that you're comparing?
Yes, so that's a great question, something that we've been deep in establishing which protocols would meet the IDE requirements for the FDA. To date, we've finished everything from benchtop to simulation and large animal in vivo models. The endpoint would be doing another round of in vivo animal models, then entering into the phase 1 to 3 clinical trials. The endpoint would be number of breaches. So we would characterize how many times there was an adverse event, and to even get to that point, we'll have to show safety, so our bits don't compromise the integrity of the implant and the structure, the surrounding structure, no fissures, et cetera.
Okay, and then just because I don't know dentistry at all, aside from getting it done, but in terms of the procedure itself, so compared to what they're doing today, again, I'm trying to understand the procedure. So are these image-guided procedures today where the doctor is, kind of traditional, like a heart surgery, if you will, right? They're watching the X-ray, they're watching the fluoro, they're watching what's happened, so they're doing image guidance. Is that what they're, how does what they're doing today, or what you're proposing with the system, compare to, right, the guidance that's done today during the actual procedure?
That's a great question as well. The most common approach is still conventional X-ray. That being said, to your point of surgical guidance, that is an attempt at managing this problem. That's one of the solutions. But the problem with that is that there's a high chance of obstructing the field of view, and with the trackers, you change the ergonomics, but that is a potential solution. That being said, it still sees about 13% complication rate because of those factors where you're invasive to the standard procedure. That being said, we could easily have an OsteoSmart Sense drill tracked, and that's probably the safest combination moving forward for patients.
So when you say it's tracked, like they would literally be able to have real-time visualization of what's happening with the drill in the tooth?
Yes, I mean, if they're doing surgical tracking, then they'd be able to see in real time on a projected CT where the positioning is, and then the OsteoSmart sensing would let them know if there's any high-risk boundaries right around the tip of that drill based on actual electrical properties of the tissue.
Okay, good. Thanks. Good,
Thank you.
Good learning.
And that's all the time we have for questions.
Okay, thank you so much.
Next up, we have SeeSpine.
Good evening, everyone. I'm very excited to present SeeSpine tonight. SeeSpine is a telehealth application to help scoliosis patients move beyond x-rays. My name is Dimentberg, and I'm the interim CEO of SeeSpine. I'm also a medical and master's student in Montreal, Canada. My co-founder, Dr. Jean Ouellette, is a pediatric spine surgeon at the Montreal Children's Hospital and the president of the pediatric division of the Canadian Spine Society. Adolescent idiopathic scoliosis is the most prevalent spine deformity. It affects 1 to 3% of children. 7 to 11 million patients are actively treated every year in North America. It leads to lung disease and multiple other disfigurements, and our current standard of care is 4 X-rays per year. The problem with scoliosis is a balancing act between radiation exposure and discontinuous follow-up. At the current standard of care, scoliosis patients are at twice the risk of breast cancer than the general population. At the same time, if we wait too long between X-rays, we allow for significant curve progression. Our solution is a mobile application for parents to remotely scan their child's 3D surface topography using just the smartphone camera to predict curve progression and guide clinical decisions. Why? Well, it's radiation-free, can be done as often as we want, takes about 15 seconds, is less expensive, and remote. Now we can revise the treatment process. After patients are diagnosed and onboarded onto our app, their physician can monitor their progress remotely. And now we can individualize the standard of care. For example, the patient that's stable at 6 months does not need an unnecessary X-ray or unnecessary hospital visit. At the same time, the patient that's already progressed at 3 months can benefit from an additional 3 months of treatment. At a $20 monthly subscription fee, we estimate a total market size of $2.25 billion annually just in North America. Now, there are other technologies trying to replace X-rays in scoliosis. Low-dose X-rays, scoliometers, ultrasounds are all trying to fulfill this task, but SeeSpine is the only alternative that is radiation-free, accurate enough to substitute an X-ray, and can be done remotely. Our go-to-market strategy is to target key opinion leaders for clinical validation studies and provide cost-free subscriptions to patients in Canada, after which we'll use our Canadian proof of concept to monetize in foreign markets. SeeSpine really tries to bridge the gap between the patients, their surgeons, and the general practitioners. For the patients, we allow them to save money. There's no radiation. We allow for frequent assessment, which leads to earlier interventions and less surgery. For the surgeons, we allow them to save time, prioritize patients based on severity, which leads to better outcomes. And for the general practitioners, we provide them a tool to confidently manage their own patients as there are significant delays to see specialists. Traction. We completed our pilot study this past winter. We onboarded our third software developer. We filed trademarks and patents, and we contacted the major regulatory bodies to confirm our Class 1 designation. Our next steps include three validation studies starting this May. We're hoping to complete our application development this summer. And assuming our Class 1 designation, we hope to get regulatory approval by early 2023. Our key milestones for this summer are to close out our $1.5 million seed round and to hire a new CEO. Our mission is to detect curve progression faster and safer to avoid major spine surgery, and our vision is to replace unnecessary repetitive X-rays with remote surface topography. Thank you.
How does this tie in with the therapeutic treatments as far as the remote access? Like, are the parents enabled to be a part of the standard of care or continuum of care? Like, are there additional benefits?
Yeah, so the only treatments we have in scoliosis are observation, bracing, and surgery. And that's really based on either age and how severe their curve is, right? So our only way to stop surgery is to brace them. So by having the constant monitoring, we can intervene earlier with bracing to prevent that surgery.
So you mentioned the technology is based on predictive analytics.
Yeah.
Have you validated what that outcome is on a predictive modeling basis relative to looking at the actual X-ray?
Yes, so our pilot study was based on X-rays themselves and comparing the two techniques. The problems with x-rays is that the average error read on an x-ray for scoliosis is 7 degrees. So when you look at a 20-degree curve and your average error is 7 degrees, well, it becomes very hard. So we're actually trying to produce really a new tool and a new metric beyond just comparing to x-rays.
Which will be better than the 7-degree
That's our
variance.
target. Our
Okay.
target is to be below 5 degrees error.
Got it.
Excuse me. You may have already mentioned this. What's the pricing model and reimbursement model?
Yeah. So obviously we're Canadian, so it works a little different. So I'll explain both. Really, we do not want patients to pay for this. That's our ultimate goal, and the economics and the standard of care work out that we believe it should be reimbursed. We are looking into options for reimbursement in the US. We know that's a much easier process than getting it reimbursed in Canada. In the short term, we are expecting to provide a monthly patient subscription model of about $20 per month, which comes out to less than the cost of one x-ray. In the short term, that's kind of how we're going to monetize it. But in the long term, we are looking to get this reimbursed by insurance companies or HMOs, have them buy in.
You talked about this rate of breast cancer with scoliosis patients. Can you describe that?
Yes. So the average scoliosis patient is followed for 5 to 8 years. So it's really on biannual visits. And at each visit, they get 2 x-rays. So there is no relation between scoliosis and breast cancer. It's purely related to the amount of x-rays they receive, which is usually upwards of 20 in the overall care.
And long term here, where do you see this company landing? Are you going to build out a sales force and a broader team, raise more capital, or do you see this in the hands of a larger company, and who?
So I would like to keep this in our own hands, and our team is pretty confident with that we have the ability to run this. We are looking for a CEO to really lead the team in the commercialization of it, but we're not looking to sell in the short term. We really want to build this out ourselves.
Evan, I was curious, what happened to your CEO?
So I am currently the CEO. I've been off school for the past year. I did an advanced course load in my medical degree, so I got a year off in the middle. But I am going back to school in September, which is why we're hiring someone to replace a certain percentage of my current tasks.
Got it.
Audience questions?
Hi, John Stevens from Simbex. You didn't mention anything about IP protection.
IP protections, yes. So we filed our provisional patents already. We're going to plan to really divide our provisional patent that covers really our entire software into multiple, but that's really only going to happen in about a year from now.
Okay. One of the things I worry about devices like this is that it's largely software-based, and it's pretty easy to get around a lot of software patents. So I don't know how much you thought about other ways to protect the business.
So any deterrent is great, in our opinion, such as a patent, trademark, anything it is. Really, the biggest moat in our case is going to be the data, acquiring the data and access to this data. One really huge benefit of having my partner on board, who's a spine surgeon and the head of this organization, is that he actually has access to really every surgeon in Canada pretty immediately. So we have access to large amounts of data relatively quickly to build out that moat as fast as possible. But the biggest moat is going to be the data and not the patent.
Great, thanks.
Hello. One of the issues with scoliosis treatment, particularly in teens, that I'm aware of is compliance with treatment. And how does your technology feed into that challenge of treatment compliance?
Yeah, so the problem with compliance related to bracing is that it's super uncomfortable to wear. They're wearing it 24 hours a day in school. One thing we're trying to do is actually stop the progression before it gets that far that they have the aesthetic problems, right? So the most common reason for consultation amongst young women, who represent 90% of our patient population, is the aesthetic outcomes. For the surgeons and the physicians, the main problem that we're looking for is lung disease and the fact that their curve is getting worse, but the patient's main priority is this aesthetic deformity. So stopping that as early as possible and proving that bracing will stop and limit the aesthetic damage is how we plan to combat that.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is David Loney from Emerald Software and formerly Prosthetics and Orthotics. So Canadian companies especially have been at the forefront of digitizing surfaces for prosthetics and orthotics for more than 20 years. So it kind of surprises me a little bit. I'm wondering what differentiates you from, say, Vorum and other companies. You're not producing the tools that digitize. What is it exactly that you're bringing to the market?
Yeah, so the current technology in scoliosis related to surface topography, which has been known for a decade, is actually all hardware-based. So what happens is they have a system of 6 cameras, 4 cameras, or even handheld scanners. But the problem with those when it comes to scoliosis is that the physicians, once the patient is in the hospital, in their office, prefer the certainty of an X-ray. So the value of surface topography and really 3D scanning comes in its remote capabilities and the way we can track patients more frequently with it.
But we are using cell phones now to digitize surfaces. So that's not what you're bringing? You're bringing the software that goes beyond that, or?
So we have proprietary software that we use for actually turning, how we acquire the data into a 3D model that is to scale and accurate enough to be quantifiable for medical purposes. You'll see you have tons of apps on your phone that you can get like an approximate 3D model of really anything, but they don't work in the context of scoliosis. They don't have enough accuracy to be able to really predict the body shape.
Great, thank you.
No, I asked a question before. I'm Phil Bunzik, though. I'm with the Canadian consulate based in Boston, so we'll connect afterwards. But in terms of, maybe I missed it, but the customer, right? Who are you selling to?
Yeah, so it's really a two-part question, and also two-part in terms of the different countries. In the short term, the answer is the patients. We're selling to the families as a monthly subscription model. Now, we do not want the patients to be paying for this long term. We're really planning to target US insurance companies, HMOs. In Canada, it's the provincial government systems that pay for all the medical products. To do that, we really need to build out the health economics and have our own proprietary studies. The reason it's hard is because there's actually no data out there that we've found that combines, the standard of care and the type of care with timing of care. And that's really where we intervene with the timing. So we need to run our own health economic studies, which our first is actually planned to start in September. And with that data, then we'll be able to target really US insurance companies, HMOs, provincial systems, so that the patients no longer have to pay.
Right. And in terms of the technology itself, obviously, you mentioned you're going to the patient, so they've been diagnosed with scoliosis. But can the technology be used as an initial tool to do an initial diagnosis to say, you have?
Yeah. So for the sake of this presentation, I kept it very brief in 5 minutes. The software with no additional adjustments is actually already ready to perform screening. So any patient can take it from home, suspicion of scoliosis, or a pediatrician, for example, can use it for that purposes. Can also be used to monitor progression, which is its main indication that I spoke of today. Diagnosis is a little tricky because for most insurance reasons or even provincial reasons, in order to get your care paid for, you need a certain diagnosis on an X-ray in order for the insurance to pay for your scoliosis care, for example. So that becomes a little more tricky. We envision down the line, once we have tons more data, that we would be able to do this, but I would say that's very far away. And another indication is actually using this to quantify the correction perioperatively. So we can scan a patient before and after and see how well we actually fix the deformity.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you.
Time for one more question.
So really interesting approach, and if it works, that's great. I want to follow up on what Dave Loney asked. So ultimately, Clay asked you about this is going to be, you think it might be more accurate than the X-rays, but you have to prove that, and the X-ray is the gold standard.
That's the problem.
So, right, but that's the business problem, right? Because the FDA is going to say you have to be better than X-rays.
Yeah.
And you're comparing against something that you think. So ultimately, how do you know this? I mean, you're going to have to get to where this is better than X-ray.
Yes.
That's the whole crux of your issue. How do you prove that?
So the intra-observer and inter-observer reliability on an X-ray is 7 degrees, and that's been proven in the literature time and time again. Now, there are algorithms and different types of software that are on the market that haven't really been commercialized yet, but are in really research phases that aim to actually automatically, with AI, machine learning, quantify the curve, the angle of the curve on an X-ray. So you feed in an X-ray and it predicts it. Now, it might not be perfect, but it solves the problem of inconsistency. So for our purposes, we'll be correlating in our studies to machine learning models that are at least consistent in their approach, and every time they read the same X-ray gets the same result, to avoid that 7-degree error. Even if it's off by 1, 2, 3 degrees up or down, the result is consistent.
So mom and dad are at home taking a picture of your back, and the angle and orientation doesn't matter, the lighting doesn't matter, none of that matters, right?
So for our scan, actually the way it works is that the variations in distance, the variations in angles actually help texture the model. So we say walk approximately 1 meter around the patient, but if you vary from 0.5 to 1.5, it actually makes the model more accurate. So having the human factor helps the software.
Okay, so then I'll just follow up and ask, how many patients do you think the FDA is going to require you to have to prove that?
So if we get a class 1, we think less than 300. If they require more, like a class 2, for example, then we're talking really in the thousands.
Okay, I think that's an important question to consider, because if the FDA would say this is better and you don't need an X-ray to prescribe treatment for 300 patients, I'd find that highly unlikely.
Well, because it might be a class 1 device, and our intended use for the FDA in the short term will be as a class 1. So we'll start it really as a screening tool, as an in-between monitoring tool, without replacing X-rays to get it approved and be able to start using it as a class 1, and then we'll really enlarge our intended use and our scope of use for the patients.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
And last up, we have Rockport Medical Technologies.
All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Saif Ansari. I'm an MD MBA candidate at Dartmouth, the Geisel School of Medicine, and the Tuck School of Business. I'm also a student consultant for Rockport Medical Technologies, and I'm here to talk about EpiCheck, which is a device to improve labor epidural outcomes. So we all know that epidurals are the most effective method of analgesia for labor, but they do fail, and this doesn't happen infrequently. The failure rates for labor epidurals are up to 15%. So out of the 2.7 million women every year who opt for a labor epidural, that means that 400,000 of them will fail. And this is not without consequences. These consequences, of course, include uncontrolled pain, sometimes necessitating general anesthesia, systemic opioids, and this can have effects for the neonate as well. And some of you might wonder, why are the failure rates so high? And this is because the current method of placement for epidural needles is done subjectively. So the correct positioning is verified in a manner it's somewhat akin to using the stars for navigation instead of Google Maps. It's very, very imprecise. Some of us might wonder, are there any existing technologies or ways that we can improve upon those rates? So there are some technologies, but they're all kind of imperfect. Fluoroscopy is one option that is used for epidurals, but it's contraindicated in obstetrics because there's radiation, and that's just not something that can be done when there's a fetus present. Another option is ultrasound. Ultrasound is very hot right now. It has a lot of great indications. Unfortunately, due to the complex anatomy of the spine, it's really not very applicable and doesn't have any sort of research behind it for that reason. No one has even studied it. There's also a newer technology known as epidural waveform analysis, or EWA. And what EWA does is it measures pressure as a needle is placed into the epidural space. This technology is on the market, it's FDA approved, and it's shown to be very effective. The failure rates are between 1% to 2%. And the problem with this technology is that EWA is very bulky. The actual technology itself is something that clinicians don't like to use, and it also requires the presence of an assistant, which is something that an anesthesiologist who is trying to quickly place an epidural does definitely not want to use. So we took a look at this and we thought, what if we could miniaturize EWA? What if we could make it smaller, and what if we could potentially make it part of the needle itself? So that brings us to EpiCheck, which is essentially a handheld EWA. There are a couple of components to EpiCheck. The first component is a handheld grip device, which contains some circuitry which can sense pressure as an epidural needle is being placed into the epidural space. This device will transmit wirelessly the pressure data to a user's smartphone or tablet so that the user can verify placement of the needle. And our business model is what we'd refer to as a Gillette razor model. So the portion of the device that's handheld is reusable. The portion of the device that actually goes through and is part of the needle cartridge is a consumable. So that's something that users would need to replenish over time. Our goal is to be able to manufacture one of these units for about $100 and eventually sell a unit for somewhere between $200 to $300. To be able to do that, we need to raise somewhere between $500,000 to $1 million. Currently, our prototype is workable, but it's not the level where we can bring it to large investors and say, this product really works, it's great, and we want you to back us. But we need to get to that level, and that's where this competition comes in. So where we are right now, we're still fundraising, we're still working on the product, but where we'd like to get it to is a point where we can bring it to investors and have them back us. Part of the process of us being able to bring this product to market is being able to refine it. So what we'd like to do is use phantom epidural models and also elicit feedback from clinicians who place epidurals regularly so that we can make sure our product is viable and something that people would actually want to use, clinicians would want to use. And our eventual goal is to be able to bring this to market for under $1 million, which is quite a small amount of money when we're talking about medical devices. And something of note as well is that because this technology is already FDA approved in a different package, and it's already very well studied, our regulatory process we expect to be very seamless. And we anticipate that by the end of 2023, we're hoping to file a 510K with the FDA. This is our team. Just very quickly, we have Dr. Alexander Abess, who's our CMO. He's a board-certified anesthesiologist with 21 years of experience. Our CMO, who is Brendan Reardon, he also has a ton of experience in device manufacturing. We also have some legal counsel with extensive experience in biomedical law and also physician scientists. Scott Gazelle, who is now at Greybird Ventures, as well as Tom Miller, who is also at Greybird Ventures. So we have a lot of experience in our team here. And that is all that I have for you guys. I'd like to take any questions now.
Curious about the IP associated with the...
Yeah, and so we've filed for a patent in the US and in Europe as well.
What type of patent?
That I don't know off the top of my head.
Isn't there a broader market for epidurals beyond the applications you described?
There is actually, I'm very glad that you asked because beyond just labor epidurals, epidurals are placed for thoracic surgeries as well. And the failure rates for those surgeries or those procedures is actually even higher. It's around 30%. So there is a much broader market for this product. Right now, we've just been focusing on labor epidurals, but the procedure is essentially the same when it's placed higher up in the spine.
Who are the current big players in the epidural market?
As far as current big players, we're really competing against fluoroscopy machines, and that's not really something that's applicable to obstetrics, so there really aren't any other big players. As I mentioned, there is an EWA device that's on the market, but it has very low adoption rates because it's just so unergonomic to use.
You spoke a bit about the costs, $100 per unit. Can you describe how you intend to manufacture this? What are the components that you need, and is this going to be made in the U.S.?
Regarding the location of manufacturing, I'm not totally sure about that just yet. But regarding the components that go into it, I can show you actually on a previous slide. So the handheld grip device is what's labeled as number 1. That contains circuitry which will sense pressure. And then there's also a consumable needle cartridge, which also has some circuitry in it as well, but it's disposable. That part that's disposable can be manufactured for about $1. We plan to sell each component or each cartridge for about $3.
So can you clarify? I think you said it would only cost $1 million to get to market. Is that what you were saying in your presentation?
Yeah, our anticipation is somewhere between $500,000 to $1 million to bring to market with FDA approval.
What does it take once you're there to get to either a model of profitability or like the $1 million gets you to market, but what do you think you need beyond that?
So our long-term goals are actually to either license this technology or to sell it to a larger device manufacturing company. So that's not something that at least I have looked at myself, but I can look and see if there's anything else and maybe get back to you.
Are there any audience questions?
Hi, Matthew from Simbex. So I was going to ask a little about, I guess, some of the technological feasibility of streaming this data to a wireless display. So there's already a number of different technologies you could choose from. One of the most popular right now is Bluetooth Low Energy, but that brings up the question, how is this device going to be powered, and what's its I guess, battery life going to look like? Is this going to have to constantly be charging, or is it going to take disposable batteries?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what we're anticipating right now is that the battery power will likely come from the disposable component of the device. So it's not something that would need to be recharged or sort of fiddled with on the go. It would be part of a complete package that's much easier to use.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
There's no more questions. Thank you. All right, can we give one more round of applause for all of our finalists? Did a great job. And so now the judges are going to deliberate for about 10 minutes and come back, present each team with a little bit of feedback, as well as announce the winner of the $10,000 grand prize. And while that is going on, everyone can vote for audience choice. So on your program, there's a QR code. If you scan it, you should be able to vote. It should appear in the same order that everyone presented. And please don't cheat by voting on multiple browsers on your phone. Additionally, this probably will take about 10 minutes or so, so if anyone wants any refreshments, they're in the lobby, but you cannot bring any food or drink back in here, so if you open a beer, do know where you put it down outside. And lastly, can I get all of the finalists on stage, please, for a photo?
Standing right.
Should we move this?
All right, can I get the finalists back on stage one last time? And
All right, so what we're going to do now is we're just going to provide just a little feedback, judges' feedback, and then we'll announce the audience choice, and then we'll announce the grand prize winner, right? Okay, Tracy, thank you. So, Ellecelle, let's give some feedback on Ellecelle for Jonny.
I think the presentation was very good, and I think it's, I guess for me, knowing that the proverbial femtech market is one of the fastest growing markets in med investment right now, it would have been helpful to have more information on the financials there, as well as kind of towards my question about the differentiation up front between current tech failure rates and kind of what you aspire to, whether you know it to be truth or not. It would help to give that aspirational kind of information with regards to where you think it can be, because if it needs more money up front, but there's a bigger return on the end, then I think that's fine to kind of take that risk in a presentation.
On this one, I would have loved to have seen clinician quotes or clinician feedback of like why this is such a big problem, what they're hearing from patients, revisions, you know, and how you're going to solve their pain points. But I know this market well, and there definitely needs to be a solution. So keep at it.
Just to follow up on that, one of my concerns is I think it's very difficult to change behavior, surgeons' behavior, and I think that'll be your biggest challenge, regardless of how much better your procedure or device is. So thought leaders are really key.
Okay. Next, we're going to give feedback on Imago for Chrissy.
So Chrissy, I thought you had incredible energy and passion. You know, I believe telehealth is just right up our alley. It's a growth market. It's a practical application of technology. Love the goal setting and the working with the patients in home. Love some of the outcomes you shared. It's a really practical idea. And that is the wearable technology to help people. And I just think it's a fabulous opportunity that you have. And good luck with the commercialization.
I would add, perhaps when you're doing another presentation like this, talk about how the timing of like what we've seen in the past couple of years, how telehealth has just jumped, and like how the market is so primed right now for this to happen, whereas it might not have been the case. And so the adoption of it, people may be more open to it. So I think it'll just work more to your advantage.
I really like how you're charging for your beta. I thought, well, gosh, couldn't you guys, a bunch of you could probably charge for your beta, right? Like that would be like $20 a month, like that could be your beta. So I like that. And I also really like your answer to the question of who would potentially be the end buyer here. And I really thought, kind of to Clay's point, the market's changing. So initially it would have been like a DJO or someone selling to rehab or someone selling to physical therapy and neuro. But it's like, oh my gosh, like the buyer might not be a med tech company. That's a shift, a big shift.
To the point of one of the questions I asked, I would think that in today's market, one of the big concerns would be the supply chain and the scalability. And so not that you necessarily have the answer because you're in that bridge area, but it would probably be good going forward to try to get a little more information about what it takes to create a stable product going forward beyond what you're building right now.
Not to pile on, but one of the other attractions is the possible application in other areas. I think you could be a very broad-based wearables company.
All right, next is Pure Technologies. Russ.
I really like the ship in the bottle metaphor. Like that is a really way in a kind of a picture is worth 1,000 words. I think, and this builds on something Ken was saying, that the testimonials coming from surgeons, and I think speaking perhaps more toward getting in and working with those surgeons and getting the adoption and the training and stuff. It just seems like that's a big hurdle that might be worth mentioning a little more.
I'd like to see like real numbers on the market and the companies in this space, and also M&A in this space, and companies that have gotten through approval, gotten to market, how much they've had to raise, how many patients they've needed in their clinical trial. Just knowing that this is a complex space, and then how you would create efficiencies as a company to make that faster and more cost effective for your investors. So for example, if there's a company out there that it takes $25 million to get through a clinical trial with 300 patients or something, how could you do it better or faster? And the companies that have gone to market, be it, if it's Zimmer or Stryker or whoever, how have they done this? Like, to show that this is possible. And also like a company like a Kyphon with kyphoplasty, like, so there's a minimally invasive alternative to existing standard of care as a comparison. Thank you. Okay. All right. Next is Rytek. Alicia.
I think there was a question about how the technology actually works with regards to just giving a better understanding of, like, I think we all understand why it's better than what the current standard of care is, but there were some questions about whether you could address how it actually works in practice and how someone would use it, and talking about your visualization and your tech and how it actually prevents the problems. So.
I guess one of the questions we had was like, could you still jab the nerve? Like, how is this preventing you from, like, is it stopping? Is there an auto stop? Or like, what if your hand slips? Like, so I'm sure you have that figured out. And then, you know, this, I think you hit the numbers on the head with, like, this is a big market. Like, when you started telling us the numbers of, like, how many of us are going to lose our teeth, you should have seen all of us. We're like, ugh. So it's good to share, like, the pain points, like, literally, like, this will affect all of you. Yeah.
And following up on the pain issue, I think you could have added some more information as to what the complications are and the implications of those complications.
Okay, next is SeeSpine. Evan.
Just one piece of feedback here. I think the revenue model to me was not terribly clear, and I understand it's different in different markets, but I think being a little bit more specific about how it is you go from the concept to actually showing how that all the math works out would have been helpful to me.
Yeah, one of the things that I guess I learned from your presentation was with regards to the cancer risk and fear cells sometimes, I guess, and maybe not in a good way, but I think in this it's a good way because it's not something I would have ever been aware of. And I think when you're talking about cancer, you're talking about a whole different level of economics beyond just trying to assist someone with a spinal challenge. So I think it would be good to maybe dive into that a little bit more because it just adds weight and gravity to the solution.
Yeah, and in the deck, if you could show, like, pictures of patients, pictures of parents helping the patient, like the pain points with how intense this is for the families and the patients, like, and how you're going to solve that. And then also maybe showing, like, okay, here's, if a patient does bracing, here are the results. Here's the results if you catch it early. So there is a solution. But also going back to Clay's point earlier, this is another example of bringing things into the home, reducing costs, reducing exposures, which is this trend that we're seeing. So. All right. And Rockport. Saif. Saif, sorry. Thank you.
I guess it's kind of the question I asked during, but if the broader epidural, I would hammer home there's a broader epidural market beyond just the labor application, and I think that might make it more attractive to a funder, and actually a bigger market with an even higher failure rate. So just one point that would perhaps gloss it up a little.
And I'm probably being repetitive on this, but I think it would be good to understand, once again, since we're dealing in medical devices, normally you just have problem solution, but a little more detail around how it works, and the difference between the current procedure versus how this improves it.
Yeah, and on that, it's like, I'd love to see some clinical anecdotes or clinical awareness of this is a huge problem from either the nurses or whoever's doing the procedures, and then monitoring the patients, and then what happens to them. And then also kind of to the technology point of how are you going to know it works? And in the spine, is there a certain area? Is there, like, what is it so you're going to know that it works in the development? Okay, and Grant, I mean, hands down, like, this group is absolutely incredible. I think everyone here was completely impressed, and you all did a tremendous job on stage in front of everybody. And I hope you can get to know each other as you're all in this same journey at very similar stages of development, market assessment, product design, things like that. So we have the audience choice winner. Who's gonna know? Okay. Oh, you don't know what it is. Okay, so we have an audience choice winner, and the winner is Evan from SeeSpine. So you get like this big recognition as the audience choice winner. So you can like post that everywhere. And then Tracy, are you gonna come up with who's Jeff? Where is Jeff Chu from Simbex? Okay, Jeff, do you want to make the announcement? Oh, people might see it.
I want to thank everybody for coming out. This has been a great event. I want to thank the judges, the sponsors, Caitlin and Tracy for really helping out and make this a great event. I'm really hoping that you guys stick around and enjoy the networking event to follow. So, in terms of the winner is Imago.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Caitlin, everyone, for putting on this event. It's super exciting. Congratulations to everyone else. It's really cool to learn about what you're building as well. Yeah, this is so exciting. So $10,000 will allow us to make approximately 5 more gloves that we can then directly get out to patients. So yeah, very exciting. Thank you all for putting this on and for your support.
I'd love to just turn this over to Carlo, because he had some great comments. If you want to give some highlights and feedback as kind of the summary here, you did a great job.
Yeah. So I think that I'm going to get the glasses on for this. I thought that telehealth is clearly just a growth market. It's one of the fastest growing segments in medical devices. And the fact that you've got a combination of robotics and telehealth, and it's wearable technology that is really helping people. The examples that you cited, kind of the qualitative description, it would be nice to get some quantitative, with that in your description. I think it would be even more impactful, right? Talk to the recovery of the patient, but cite some quantitative examples. Would be really helpful. I think the target audience of neurologists are underserved. You have you're meeting an unmet need. It's a near-term opportunity, and you're showing that. And your passion around a very practical idea really struck me, very strongly, and it really comes across. And I think if you would smile more, you would go that much further. So feel good about that.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for all the feedback.
Good deal. Congratulations.
And I would just like to thank everyone again for attending, as well as our judges and all of our sponsors, as well as CATV and Lebanon Opera House for putting on a flawless event. So thank you so much.
Yeah, you too, Claire. Take care.
Reception.